My husband and his son called me a gold digger for years, but when his son crashed my BMW, I revealed I paid for everything and sued for $60K. Now he lives in a cheap apartment and she's traveling to Greece. I'm 34 years old. I work in financial consulting, and it's been about a year and a half since I divorced Daniel after 6 years together. And honestly, there are still days when I find it hard to believe everything that happened. Like, when I think about it, I realize I put up with too much for too long. But well, I guess that's how these things go, right? You keep letting things slide until you reach that moment when you just can't anymore. In my case, that moment came when Daniel's son, Ethan, took my car without permission and crashed it into a pole. And it wasn't just any car. It was a BMW that I had bought myself, with my own money, after working like crazy for years to be able to afford it. But I'm going too fast. Let me back up a bit and tell this from the beginning because otherwise nothing makes sense. I met Daniel about 8 years ago at a business conference. He had his own import company or something like that. Seemed to be doing well financially. And I was at a good point. In my career too. He was a widower. His wife had died of cancer like 2 years earlier. And he had a son, Ethan, who at that time was 13 or 14 years old. I don't remember exactly. At first everything seemed normal, you know. We went out a few times, we got along well, we had interesting conversations, and I thought it could work despite him having a teenage son. It's not like I had anything against kids or whatever, but I always knew it was going to be complicated because, well, it was obvious the kid was going to have problems with his dad dating someone after losing his mom. And yeah, I was right. From day one, Ethan made it crystal clear that he didn't like me, and basically didn't want me around his father. The first time I went to Daniel's house, Ethan didn't even say hello to me. He stayed in his room all night, and when his dad asked him to come down for dinner with us, he came down, served himself food, and went back to his room without saying a word. Daniel apologized and told me the kid was going through a difficult time, that he needed time to understand him. And I obviously understood. I mean, he had just lost his mom. How could he not be angry at the world? But as the months passed and then the first year, nothing changed. Ethan kept ignoring me, looked at me with contempt when I spoke, and if I tried to ask him something like how was school or how did the test go, he'd answer with monosyllables, or just not answer at all. Daniel always said the same thing. Give him time, he'll change. He just needs to get used to it, but it never happened. We got married about 2 years after meeting. I had my doubts, honestly, because the situation with Ethan hadn't improved at all, but Daniel promised me things were going to be different once we were married. That Ethan would understand. I was part of the family now. Spoiler alert, he didn't understand anything. Actually, I think it got worse because now I lived in the house all the time and he couldn't avoid me. But, well, I loved Daniel. Or at least I thought I did at that time. And I thought we could make it work. The wedding was small, something intimate. Because Daniel didn't want to do anything too big yet. Said Ethan wasn't ready for something like that. So it was basically just the two of us. My brother David, and a couple of close friends. Ethan didn't even go. He stayed at a friend's house that weekend. This is where things start to get ugly. Like a year after we got married, Daniel's business started having problems. I don't know exactly what happened. He never explained the details well to me. He just said he had lost a couple of important contracts and things were slow. But the truth is, overnight the money stopped coming in. And it's not like I was insensitive or anything. Obviously, I supported Daniel. I told him not to worry. That we'd get through it, that I could cover expenses while he recovered. The problem is that while turned into 3 full years where I literally paid for everything. And when I say everything, it's everything. The rent for the house, because we lived in a pretty big rental house, utilities, food, Daniel's car when it broke down and we had to fix it, going out, absolutely everything. And that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that I also ended up paying for Ethan's college. I paid for Daniel's son's college, a kid who hated me and who never spoke to me unless it was to insult me or complain about something. But Daniel asked me with that face of, "Please, honey, I can't let my son lose his opportunity to study. His mother would have wanted him to go to college." And I, like an idiot, said yes because I thought maybe, just maybe, Ethan was going to appreciate the gesture and things would improve between us. Obviously, that didn't happen. The kid entered college. I paid his tuition every semester, his books, his food, everything, and he kept treating me like I was garbage. He'd ignore me when he came home on weekends, leave his dirty dishes for me to wash as if I were the maid. And a couple of times I even heard him talking badly about me with his friends when he thought I wasn't home. What Ethan didn't know, because Daniel never told him, is that I was the one supporting the whole family. Daniel had this thing about not wanting his son to know things were bad financially, said he didn't want to worry him or that the kid would lose respect for him or something like that. So basically, he lied to Ethan about where the money for everything came from. Ethan thought his dad still had his business running well, and that I was just the wife who was there enjoying life. And this is important because it explains what happened next. Ethan was like 18 or 19 when he started overhearing the arguments between Daniel and me about money. It's not that we argued much, but there were times when I was very stressed because I was spending more than I was earning to support everyone, and I'd tell Daniel that he needed to find a way to help with expenses, that I couldn't keep going like this indefinitely. Ethan heard those conversations and drew his own conclusions, which basically were that I was a gold digger who only wanted his dad's money. One day I came home and Ethan was in the living room with a friend. I walked past there to go to my room and I heard him tell his friend, "My dad made a mistake marrying that woman. She's only with him for the money. She's a damn gold digger." I froze there in the hallway. Couldn't believe what I had just heard, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make a scene in front of Ethan's friend. That night, I talked to Daniel and told him we needed to tell Ethan the truth, that the kid had to know I was the one paying for everything, that he couldn't keep thinking I was a gold digger when it was exactly the opposite. But Daniel refused, said that would humiliate him in front of his son, that he couldn't allow Ethan to know he had failed as a provider, and basically asked me to hold on a little longer, that soon things were going to get better. I, as always, gave in, because Daniel had this ability to make me feel guilty for wanting to set boundaries. Now looking back, I realize how manipulative all of that was. But at that time, I just wanted to keep peace in the house and for Daniel not to feel bad. The following months were horrible. Ethan treated me worse and worse, called me names when Daniel wasn't around, left his things scattered all over the house on purpose so I'd have to pick them up. And once he even yelled at me that he wished I would leave and leave his dad alone. I cried almost every day, felt trapped in my own house, and Daniel always found excuses for his son's behavior. That he's stressed about school, that he still misses his mom, that he's young and doesn't know how to express his emotions. There was always a justification for everything Ethan did, but there were never any real consequences. Daniel would talk to him, tell him to apologize to me, and Ethan would mumble something resembling, "I'm sorry," and go on with his life, as if nothing happened. The day everything exploded was a Tuesday. I remember perfectly because I had a super important meeting in the morning with a new client who could represent a big contract for my company. I got up early, got ready, went down to have a quick breakfast before leaving, and when I left the house, my car keys weren't where I always left them. I looked all over the house, in my purse, in the bedroom, in the kitchen, and nothing. I asked Daniel if he had seen them, and he said no. I went out to the garage thinking maybe I had left them in the car the night before, and when I got to the garage, my car wasn't there. Just like that, the space where I always parked my BMW was empty. I ran back into the house and yelled at Daniel, "Where was my car?" And he looked confused, said he didn't know, that he hadn't moved it. Then we both realized at the same time what had happened. Ethan. We ran up to Ethan's room and he wasn't there. His bed was made, but he wasn't there. Daniel started calling him on his cell phone like crazy, and I was standing there feeling like I was going to have a panic attack, because not only had my car disappeared, but I was going to be late for my most important meeting of the year. After like 10 calls, Ethan finally answered and with the most casual voice in the world told his dad, "Oh yeah, I took Jennifer's car. I needed to go see some friends last night, and yours didn't have gas." I can't explain what I felt at that moment. It was a mix of fury, disbelief, and something deeper, like betrayal. This kid, who didn't work, whose school I was paying for, who lived in a house I was paying for, took my car without my permission to go party with his friends. And the worst hadn't even happened yet. Daniel asked him where he was, and Ethan said he was on his way back. Not to worry, that he was going to return the car. Not to worry. As if I was the one overreacting for being upset that someone stole my car. Half an hour later, Ethan arrived, and the moment I saw my car, I realized something was wrong. The entire left side was completely destroyed, the side mirror hanging, huge scratches on the doors, and the front headlight shattered. I ran out of the house and yelled at Ethan, "What the hell did you do to my car?" And he got out with that carefree attitude he always had and said, "I had a little accident. I crashed into a pole when I was parking. But it's not a big deal. It can be fixed." It's not a big deal. My car, that I had worked years to be able to buy, that was my pride, that literally represented all the effort I had put into my career, was destroyed, and this kid was telling me it wasn't a big deal. Something broke inside me at that moment. I walked toward Ethan, and before I could process it myself, I had already slapped him, hard. You could hear the sound echo in the street, and Ethan just stood there with his hand on his cheek, looking at me with wide eyes. Daniel yelled my name and ran to get between us, but I was already talking, or rather, yelling. I told Ethan everything, absolutely everything, I had been holding in for years, that I was the one paying the rent, that I paid for his college, that I paid for the food he ate every day, that his dad didn't have a penny to his name, and that if it weren't for me, they'd both be living on the street. I yelled at him that I wasn't any gold digger, that he was an ungrateful person who had no idea of everything I had sacrificed to support them both, and that I was fed up, completely fed up with his disrespect and his shitty attitude. Ethan stayed quiet. I think it was the first time I'd seen him speechless, and Daniel tried to calm me down, but I pushed him away. I went back into the house, grabbed my purse, my work stuff, and told Daniel to call me when Ethan wasn't there anymore because I wasn't going to spend one more minute in the same house as that kid. Daniel begged me to stay, to talk things through calmly, but I was already outside getting into an Uber because obviously I couldn't use my car. I went straight to the office, arrived late to my meeting, lost the client, and after that I went to a hotel. I spent 3 days in that hotel thinking about everything, about my life, about my marriage, about how I had gotten to that point. I watched the news without paying attention, ordered food by delivery, and basically cried and slept. Daniel called me like 50 times a day, sent me messages saying we needed to talk, that Ethan was very sorry, that he was sorry too, to please come back home. But I knew that if I went back, it was going to be the same as always, another empty apology, promises that things were going to change, and then everything would continue exactly the same. At some point during those 3 days, I realized something. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go back to that house. I didn't want to keep living like that. I didn't want to keep being the one who paid for everything while being treated like garbage. I wanted out of all of that, and the only way to do it was to end the marriage. On the 4th day, I called a lawyer, Robert Martinez. My brother David had recommended him. He worked in the legal field too. I told him the whole situation, and he told me I had a solid case for divorce and that I could also sue to recover the money I had spent supporting Daniel and Ethan all those years, or at least part of it. We started the process immediately. I sent Daniel a message telling him I was going to file for divorce and that there was no point in continuing to talk because my decision was already made. Daniel called me crying, saying I was overreacting, that we couldn't end things like this after 6 years together, that he loved me, and that we could fix things. I told him there was nothing left to fix, that this had been breaking for years, and that I no longer had the energy to keep trying. The following days were a nightmare of messages and calls. Daniel alternated between begging me to come back and getting angry at me for being so drastic. Ethan also started sending me messages, which he had never done before, asking for forgiveness and saying he didn't know I paid for everything, that if he had known he would have never treated me like that, and basically telling me to please not divorce his dad. And here's the thing, I knew those apologies weren't genuine. They weren't because they really felt bad about how they had treated me. They were because they had realized that without me, the money ran out. Without me paying rent, they were going to have to move to a cheaper place. Ethan would probably have to leave college or get a job to pay for it himself. And Daniel was going to have to face the reality that his business had completely failed. About a week after being at the hotel, Daniel sent me a different message. He told me he had talked to Ethan and that his son had agreed to go live with his aunt for a while to give me space, that if I came back, things were going to be different because Ethan wouldn't be there anymore, and that he was going to look for a job to help with expenses. And I, because part of me still wanted to believe things could work, told him I would think about it. But before giving him an answer, I wanted to test something. I sent him a message saying that if I came back, Ethan had to leave the house permanently, not just for a while, and that Daniel had to cut contact with him until Ethan learned to respect me. I knew it was an impossible request. A father is never going to cut contact with his son. But I needed to know what Daniel prioritized, me or Ethan. Daniel took a full day to respond. Finally, he wrote me saying he couldn't do that Ethan was his son and he couldn't just cut him out of his life, but that we could find another solution. To please reconsider. And there I had my answer. After 6 years together, after having supported him financially for 3 years, after having endured his son's mistreatment all that time, I was still the second choice. I didn't respond to that message. Instead, I took screenshots of the entire conversation, where Daniel basically admitted he was going to prioritize Ethan over me no matter what, and I sent them to Ethan. Yes, I know. It was cruel. But I wanted Ethan to see that his dad was using him, that Daniel was willing to tell him whatever as long as I came back and kept paying for everything. Ethan responded to me almost immediately saying I was a manipulative bitch. But like 2 hours later, I got another message from him saying he had confronted his dad and was leaving the house because he couldn't believe Daniel was willing to cut him off just to get my money back. He wrote to me, "You were right about him. He only cares about money," and blocked both Daniel and me after that. Daniel called me furious that night, yelling at me. What had I done? That, because of me, his son hated him and had left the house. That I had destroyed their relationship. I told him I hadn't destroyed anything. That he had only done that by lying to Ethan for years and using him as an excuse to keep me controlled. I hung up and blocked him too. A week later, he got the divorce papers. My lawyer Robert had done an incredible job documenting all the expenses I had made for the family during the last 3 years. We had bank transfers, receipts, account statements, everything. We were asking Daniel to pay me half of everything I had spent, which ended up being like $85,000. Maybe a bit more. I don't remember the exact figure. Daniel obviously contested the lawsuit, saying the amount was ridiculous, that I was exaggerating, and that many of those expenses were things I had wanted to buy for myself, not for the family. His lawyer was terrible, honestly. Presented a bunch of arguments that made no sense and that my lawyer easily dismantled. We had to go to mediation before the case went to trial, and I didn't want to be in the same room as Daniel, but I had no choice. It was super awkward. Daniel sat on the other side of the table with his lawyer and didn't look me in the eyes at any point. My lawyer presented all the evidence, explained how I had supported the family for years while Daniel contributed nothing, and the mediator basically told Daniel he had no case, and that it was in his best interest to reach an agreement. Daniel kept insisting he didn't owe me anything, that I had decided to pay for those things of my own free will, and that he never forced me to do it. His lawyer tried to argue the same thing, but my lawyer pulled out messages where Daniel asked me to lend him money, promising he'd pay me back when his business improved. Emails where he asked me to pay Ethan's tuition, telling me it was a temporary loan. Basically evidence that he knew perfectly well he owed me money. The mediation ended without any agreement, so we had to go to court. The entire divorce process took like 7 months. It was exhausting, expensive, and emotionally left me destroyed. But in the end, I won. The judge determined Daniel owed me a significant amount of money, not the full $85,000 but like $60,000, and ordered him to pay me in monthly installments over the next 5 years, because Daniel obviously didn't have the money to pay me everything at once. The divorce was finalized about a year and a half ago. Daniel had to move out of the house where we lived because he could no longer afford the rent, and according to what I know from mutual friends, he went to live in a small apartment in a cheaper area of the city. Ethan, I have no idea what happened to him. After he blocked his dad, I never heard anything about him again. Part of me feels sorry for the kid. He lost his mom, grew up with a dad who basically lied to him about everything, and then found out in the worst way that he was being used. But another part of me, the part that remembers all the insults and mistreatment, feels absolutely nothing for him. Maybe that makes me a bad person. I don't know. The hardest thing after the divorce wasn't the legal part or having to look for a new place to live, because I stayed at the hotel for like 2 months until I found an apartment I liked. The hardest thing was seeing how all our mutual friends took Daniel's side. He posted a whole story on social media, playing the victim, saying I had abandoned him when he needed me most, that I had broken his heart after he had opened his home and his life to me, basically painting me as the bad guy. And people believed him. Friends I considered close. People who knew our situation started sending me messages telling me I had been very cruel to Daniel. How could I leave him like that? And some even used the same words Ethan used to use, called me a gold digger and opportunist. That hurt more than anything else. Realizing that all that time those people really... I thought I was with Daniel for his money when it was literally the opposite. I cut contact with all of them. It was liberating. Honestly. I realized I didn't need people in my life who were so willing to believe lies about me without even asking for my version of the facts. My brother David was incredible support during all that time. He helped me move, was with me at the court hearings, and basically reminded me every day that I had done the right thing by getting out of that situation. I also started therapy, because after everything that happened, I realized I needed help processing everything and understanding why I had put up with it for so long. My therapist helped me see the patterns of manipulation that were in my marriage, how Daniel made me feel guilty every time I wanted to set boundaries, how he had trained me to prioritize his needs, and Ethan's over my own. Now I'm in a much better place. Mentally, emotionally, financially, I got my life back. Basically, I got that big contract I had lost the day of the accident. Well, not that specific one, but another similar one, and my career is better than ever. I was able to buy myself another car. Not a BMW this time, but an Audi. And every time I drive it, I feel like a reminder that I got out of that situation and that I'm okay. The monthly payments Daniel sends me arrive on time. His lawyer sent me a message a few months ago asking if we could renegotiate the terms because Daniel was having financial problems, and I obviously said no. It's not my problem. And it sounds harsh, but that's how it is. Last week, I received a message from a number I didn't know. It was Ethan. I don't know how he got my new number. Probably some mutual friend gave it to him or something. The message said he wanted to talk to me, that he had been in therapy too, and his therapist had suggested he contact me to apologize properly for everything. I didn't respond to him. I blocked the number and went on with my day. I have no interest in having contact with him again, not after everything. Some people don't deserve a second chance, and Ethan is definitely one of them. I know that probably sounds bitter or resentful, but the truth is I'm at peace with my decision. I don't owe them anything, neither him nor Daniel, and I'm not going to put my emotional well-being at risk again for either of them. I'm planning to take a long vacation next month. I'm going to Greece, which I had always wanted to visit but never could because all my money went to supporting Daniel and Ethan. I'm going alone, to enjoy, to eat well, to see beautiful places, and to celebrate that I got out of that toxic situation and that now my life is mine again. And yes, there are still difficult days where I wonder if I did the right thing, if I should have tried harder, but those days are fewer and fewer. Most of the time I feel relieved to have gotten out of there when I did, before more years passed and I lost more of myself in that marriage. I guess that's my story. It doesn't have a perfect movie-type ending, but it's real, and it's mine. And now I can move forward without carrying the weight of two people who never valued me.